What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. The NFL draft is over. The chips have fallen. The cookie has crumbled. Some teams did really good, and other teams are the Atlanta Falcons. But there are winners, there are losers, and we have a great guest, Garrett Price from Dynasty Nerds, to talk about it. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. Joe Zolo, finally enjoying his honeymoon. He came and teased us for a few weeks and then, or 1 week, 2 shows, and then left again. But Josh Hudson, back with me. How you doing tonight, Josh?
I'm great. It's been a long time coming, but I'm so incredibly excited to have Garrett Price on the show with us.
Yeah, we let Jay have him on first, but we've never had him on the flagship, no pun intended. And if you guys haven't picked it up yet, if you've played Dynasty for any period of time, you've probably heard Garrett Price. You've certainly heard Dynasty Nerds. Garrett, welcome to the show. Welcome to No Pun Intended.
Man, what a very gracious introduction there. I appreciate it, guys. You guys are great dudes, and I always enjoy coming and talking rookie class. So I'm excited for this.
So the point of the show is draft winners and losers. We're all going to have our opinions. We're going to talk about the rookies. We're going to talk about the vets, but there was a little bit of news this week. One of it that was going to come up a little bit later, but first and foremost, actually, they're both coming up a little bit later. So we don't need to spend too much time on this. Ezekiel Elliott back with the Cowboys. It's a 1-year deal. It's a lot less money than he was making the last time he was with the Cowboys. It came out today that he is switching to jersey number 15 that he wore in college. Trey Lance is moving to jersey 19. Hopefully Trey Lance got some money out of the deal, because that's the only action he's going to see in Dallas this season, because he's Trey Lance. And then Zay Jones, favorite of the show. If Joe Zolo were here, we'd probably spend the next 15 minutes talking about Zay Jones. Zay Jones released. But again, both of these are actually going to come up later in the show. So, Josh, do you have anything to add on news and notes? I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about that we're not going to talk about in 15 minutes. So,
yeah, not really. I mean, the moment that Dallas didn't pick a running back in the draft, you kind of figured something was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been talk of a reunion with Dallas, and Zeke showed a little bit of juice filling in towards the end of the year with Ramondre, but outside of that, he's a part-time running back at this point. You're not going to get 250 carries out of him like you used to. And his yards per game, coincidentally, has dropped, I think, every single year since either his rookie year or his second year in the league. So, we'll see how it goes. But good luck, Dallas.
Big backs like that, that's how it goes. Dallas, incidentally, building their team how I build my dynasty teams. Young at quarterback, young at wide receiver, and just give me every old running back in the NFL, and we'll try to make one of them work in the lineup each week. But let's get into the heart of the story. It's the winners from the weekend. 3 days of the NFL draft. All the landing places are in place. A couple of surprise undrafted free agents. I don't know how many of those might come up in the show today, but let's start with the rookies, Garrett. And when you look at these rookies based on landing spot, based on draft capital, who would you earmark as the winners of the weekend's draft?
Yeah, one of the winners that I'm going to go with here is Jonathon Brooks. We had hardly any running backs. In fact, we didn't have any running backs go in the second round. He was the only one that went in the second round. So when you look at that from a draft capital standpoint, that tells me that from an NFL perspective, there was nobody else that was even close to him. So Jonathon Brooks got the second round draft capital. But when we look at it from a dynasty perspective, when we're in our rookie drafts right now, there's only a couple running backs that were even sort of favorable as far as guys that we think were talented running backs and guys that had good landing spots. You could really argue maybe just 2, 3. And so that puts an extra premium on these running backs. So, looking at Jonathon Brooks, after you get kind of that top 8 in Superflex, teams start to get a little more aggressive, knowing I only have so many opportunities to get a running back and help my team this year. Yeah. Past years, there might be 6, 7, 8 running backs that you think could help your team. This year, there's only a few. So I think Jonathon Brooks is a big winner from that perspective.
You're not concerned about it's so weird to call this a crowded backfield, but last year they used a lot of Miles Sanders. They used a lot more of Chuba Hubbard than I think anyone expected them to. Are you thinking that this goes into a situation where Brooks is the one and Chuba and Sanders are the 2A, 2B? Is Sanders even a Panther by the time week 1 rolls around?
Yeah, I think that's the situation that we end up in. Maybe not to start the year. He is coming off the ACL injury. So it might take some time to get him into the offense. But like we see with most talented young running backs, it takes them a little bit of time to get into the offense, get things going. And then by partway through the year, they've just left the rest of the guys in the dust. I think he's a more talented back at this point in his career than either of those other two guys. And I think the Panthers put a premium on that position for a reason. This is a team with a lot of holes and a lot of needs. You could argue maybe they should have focused on some other positions, but they valued this guy so highly that they wanted to be the only team to take a guy in the second round. So overall, I'm not overly worried about those other two guys.
So I love when I bring a guest on who perfectly segues how I was going to segue to Josh and be like, Josh, we all knew or thought we knew Brooks was going to be the first running back taken, but he was the only one taken in the second round, as Garrett Price just pointed out there for you. Were you surprised that none of the other guys crept into the second round? Or are you surprised Brooks made it into the second round? Did you expect him to go that early?
No, I think I figured at least one was going to go in the second. I know everybody talks about how not great this running back class was, how maybe underwhelming it's been in comparison to previous years. But the way that this talent fell in this draft, it was a lot of wide receivers. It was a lot of offensive linemen. We talked a lot about how deep the cornerback class was. Like, it's really not a big surprise to me. It really was a perfect storm. Because if these positions in this class are really good, this position, which has consistently been devalued over the years in the NFL, is not very good. What did we think was going to happen? Let's be real here. I think the bigger surprise was that the Panthers were the ones that took the first running back, in my opinion. But when you look at how the Panthers draft ultimately fell, they bring in a new head coach who is offensive minded. I don't think they took a single defensive player in this draft. Like, they said, you know what? We're just going to roll and we're going to build the offense up. We're going to build it in his image. We'll tackle the defense later. They hammered the interior of the offensive line very early in free agency. And they said, we're going to protect our investment. And that investment was the first overall pick from the 2023 draft, quarterback Bryce Young. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They drafted Jonathon Brooks. They drafted Xavier Legette. They drafted Jatavian Sanders. They put pieces around this young quarterback, and they said, we want you all to grow together with this head coach that we just signed to a 6-year deal. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say, you know what? Yeah, Jonathon Brooks, that's Canales' guy. It pains me because I love Miles Sanders, and I thought he got thrown a bone initially with that contract, but then got discarded very quickly once Frank Reich got jettisoned. But I think that, you know, like you mentioned, it's a crowded backfield. Yes, it is crowded because there's 3 of them. And all of them have shown that they can handle certain workloads in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're not excellent at those certain workloads. But if those guard signings that they brought in actually work out and help fortify that offensive line in Carolina, maybe Jonathon Brooks doesn't actually need to be rushed into carrying a very heavy workload very quickly, which ultimately could be better for him in the long run.
There you go. And Gator pointed out he just got Jonathon Brooks at his best ball draft. But I think the most important comment we've gotten so far is from Shevin, who says if this draft was 10 years ago, Brooks might not have been the only second-round running back, Garrett. Is there truth to this?
Shev's my boy. Yeah. So I coming out of college, I was a linebacker, but in high school, I did play running back as well. I was molded in the image of Peyton Hillis. That was my icon. That was who I was emulating. So
your ceiling was Madden cover boy.
I was just gonna say your ceiling was the cover of Madden, and then for no one to ever hear about you again.
You know what? It's fun. Exactly, 100%. But more so on the second point, not the first. But a couple of years ago, if you search hard enough, a couple of years ago, there was I was on the Scott Fishbowl like potathon, and
Yeah.
one of the things to raise money was Garrett leaking his high school highlight tape. So if you search hard enough, you'll find some vintage 2000s running back Garrett Price high school film. But good luck. It's hidden well.
If you don't mind my asking, Garrett, I don't know if I should just ask this live on air. I know you're an Ohio guy, also Ohio guy. Where did you go to school?
Small school near Worcester. I don't know if you know where Worcester's at.
I'm from Massillon, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're very familiar with that area then. So a small school called Northwestern.
Yeah.
Yep. Small school called Northwestern, kind of right between Worcester, Lodi, Ashland, right in that area.
There you go. Just a little Ohio connection I wanted to make there real quick. So,
there we go. Love it.
All right, Josh. Garrett talked to us about running backs, but you got 2 wide receivers for your winners.
Actually, I have 3 wide receivers.
Oh,
so
you just,
I realized.
Let's be clear,
this.
you just changed it.
Yeah, I realized because I was going through, I always make a copy of the show sheet for my own personal notes. And I was going through and I added him after I went through and did it on the main one. And I was like, look, we can't, I put this guy on the thumbnail. I can't not talk about Xavier Worthy as the biggest winner of the NFL draft, right? Because any rookie wide receiver that lands in KC, seriously, how are they not a winner when you get to catch passes from Patrick Mahomes?
You know they're number 1 in my heart.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like I get everybody wants to knock Xavier Worthy because people that come out and run the fast 40 times, they're not always the best players, right? But to me, Xavier Worthy is not John Ross. He's not some of these other fast college players that come into the NFL. He had 3 years in college of 60 or more receptions. He had 26 total touchdowns in 3 years. I'll even dive into the analytics of it. He has a 97th percentile breakout age. Like, analytically speaking, he's a guy that can come in and actually perform in the NFL, and he gets first-round draft capital, and he gets the best damn quarterback in the NFL. Why are we punching holes into this guy? I don't get it. But yes, he is very fast. Go ahead.
I say before you move on, Garrett, I wanted your take on Xavier Worthy because it seems like everybody's favorite name to throw out is John Ross, and it's just such, in my opinion, a bad comparison. So hopefully I'm not pre-insulting you. But what was your take on Worthy coming into the draft process?
You are not pre-insulting me. Nothing to worry about there. No. So for us, tape is really, really important. That's one of the things that we really hammer home.
Yes, we shared so many of your videos where you guys talked about tape on our threads. Kudos to DynastyNerds for all the great work you guys are doing out there. So yeah,
appreciate the love, man. Yeah, so we spend a lot of time grinding tape and things like that, and watching Worthy. That's kind of what I was wondering when I first turned on his tape. I was like, man, is this just another like Darius Hayward Bay, and like these guys that are just stupid fast, but offer very little else other than just track speed. And I kind of got the same feel as when I watched Devon Achane last year, where no, this guy's a football player. This guy isn't a track star, although he could be, but he's a football player. And watching him play, despite a very thin frame, dude would do his best to throw his weight around. Didn't always do much, but you could tell he had that football player mentality, not the I'm afraid to get hit mentality, which was big for me with a guy that's a little bit of a lower BMI type of guy. But the biggest thing was, I think, watching his route running. He was a very smooth and efficient route runner, especially on those comeback routes, which he's going to feast on at the next level because teams they're going to play cover 2. They're going to back the corners up at times. They're going to do the best they can to not get beat deep. And so what happens when you don't want to get beat deep? You give up a lot of underneath things. So he's going to feast on some of those comeback routes. So I have no issue with the Chiefs taking him there. I think that was a good pick. I think he's going to be a good pro. And to Gator's question, what was his nerd score? He ended up, for our combined nerd score, I believe he was our wide receiver 5 or 6 in the class. So he got a very solid score from us. That's pre-landing spot. Yeah, our nerd scores, they lock before the draft, so we're not allowed to touch them once the draft happens. So, which usually translates well, but every once in a while we look like idiots. But for the most part, it's actually outpaced draft capital. So.
Yeah. And then Josh, you got a couple more wide receivers.
Yeah, I continuing the point on Worthy though. I know a lot of people are going to go through and they're going to compare him to Tyreek Hill, right? It's look what Andy Reid did to Tyreek Hill or did with Tyreek Hill. To me, they're two completely different players, but go all the way back to Andy Reid's Eagles days. He can be used very similarly to Deshaun Jackson. Jackson had 3,000-yard seasons with Andy Reid. He averaged almost 6 targets a game, almost 4 receptions a game, just shy of 68 yards per game, and averaged almost 5 touchdowns per season. Look, maybe he's not a top 12 wide receiver in this offense, but Deshaun Jackson wasn't catching passes from Patrick Mahomes either.
I was just gonna say that.
And Jackson never topped 60% catch rate either. Xavier Worthy just last year with a quarterback who couldn't hit the freaking ocean while standing in it, throwing a beach ball at it, had a 62% catch rate. I think Xavier Worthy's going to be just fine. And I'm more than willing to put him as my wide receiver 4 amongst rookies.
There you go. And you had 2 other guys.
Yeah. Lad McConkey, I think, is a clear winner here, going from Georgia to Justin Herbert. Let's be real here. There's not a ton of competition. Quentin Johnston is kind of meh. We saw the bricks for hands last year. Josh Palmer has been steady, if unspectacular, but he has a clear opportunity to be the wide receiver 1, if only because this new regime is the one that drafted him. They did not draft Quentin Johnston, but we also saw kind of a lot of these underneath routes with how Justin Herbert throws to Keenan Allen, that McConkey can have a very similar type of impact. But the one thing that I found pretty interesting is that when you look at Greg Roman as a play caller, especially over the last 4 years with Baltimore, he had more often than not 2 guys that topped 20% target share. Yes, one of them was a tight end. The other one was a wide receiver. Name me the tight end that's on the Chargers right now.
That would be, isn't it Colby Parkinson?
If you got to think that long, then it ain't it. Yeah, Colby Parkinson's a blocking tight end.
It's Will Dissly, though. Parkinson's
Dissly. Yeah. Same thing. Blocker, not a pass catcher. So McConkey has a pretty clear shot at least an 18% target share. And even if they do go more of a lower volume pass attack, that should still be at least 90 targets. And I think that comes out to a pretty solid rookie season.
And then you got the Bengals, Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, I think Burton falls into a really good spot here. T. Higgins, kind of not happy with his current situation, the contract, etc. They still haven't signed a third option at wide receiver. Yoshi Voss was a later round draft pick from last year's class. Jermaine Burton, they invested day 2 draft capital in. I think he will see an opportunity to at least have 80 targets in year 1. If they don't bring back T. Higgins or can't work out an extension opposite Jamar Chase, you might be looking at over 100 targets as a wide receiver 2 by 2025.
Yeah.
So I think just like really all 3 of these guys, I think are pretty solid values where they're going. And they definitely increase their draft stock, especially in rookie drafts and dynasty, but also have the ability to be impact players in year 1 in redraft.
And for me, I looked at a guy who has certainly won the world over with post-draft interviews, Mr. Keon Coleman, going to the Buffalo Bills. If you have not seen him in his yellow coat post-draft, go look it up right now. You are not going to be the least bit disappointed. But just the landing spot, the fact that, Buffalo does not really have a 6'4" wide receiver other than like Dalton Kincaid. And so literally he's going to be a very tall person amongst very shorter people. And I think that's going to be a target that stands out to Josh Allen. And then I love what Trey Benson has found himself in with Arizona. James Conner's obviously going to kind of be in his way for a year, but a lot of folks said Trey Benson was the only 3-down back out of this entire draft class, mainly because of Jonathon Brooks' injury. They didn't know what he was going to step in. Trey Benson possesses the skills to be a 3-down back. Arizona seems to like 3-down backs. They seem to like to just use one guy over and over again. Hopefully we see a little 50-50 split between Coleman and Benson this year, but I think we see Benson take that job over next year, and it's going to work out really, really well. And Gator knows me. Keon Coleman's 6'4". That's all you need to say to get me to fall in love with a wide receiver. Landing spot and draft capital helps. The guys I've been falling in love with have worked out terribly. A.T. Perry last year, though, I think he can blow up a little bit this year, but that's because I never stop believing. Before we get into the veterans who won, I just want to thank everybody for watching right now. Make sure if you are not watching on YouTube, you can click the little link, pop over to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We are well on our way to 1,000 subscribers. We are trying to get there before the season starts, and you can help us with a simple click of the button. And as we mentioned, we're going to start with the rookies. We're going to talk about the veterans. Garrett, when you look at this class, maybe it's because they got somebody some help, or maybe it's because they didn't get any competition. Who would you earmark as a veteran that won this class?
Yeah, just real quick with the rookies. One other guy that's like more of a deeper sleeper type of winner, Tyrone Tracy from 5th round pick, but he goes to the Giants in a situation where it's Devin Singletary, which is fine. But if there was a path of least resistance, that would be one of the easiest paths for a later round guy to maybe get to see some opportunity, a role. They need playmakers in that offense so badly, so maybe he could be that guy. But going to the veteran,
Damian Pierce might argue with you about Devin Singletary being the path of least resistance.
that's fair. That's fair. But going to the veterans, I think one of the first ones that kind of jumped off the page to me was Zack Moss. I thought Cincinnati was a place that could easily snatch up one of these running backs. They had Joe Mixon for years. They used and abused him, and they moved on. And I thought they were going to get a guy like a Trey Benson, like a Braelon Allen, like a somebody physical between the tackles, and then maybe utilize Chase Brown as a third down back. They didn't. So Zack Moss really kind of secured that job. I thought that was a really good situation for him to fall into, and I think he definitely presents himself as one of the winners from the veteran group.
I think that lends itself to asking about last year's draft class, because they didn't add anybody, but they did take Chase Brown last year, and people got very excited about Chase Brown last year because there was the Mixon contract and the Mixon trade rumors and everything about Mixon no longer being a Cincinnati Bengal. We saw spurts of good Chase Brown last year. Should Zack Moss people be more worried about Chase Brown, or is this just going to be a relationship where they kind of just split everything down the middle?
I think it is going to be one where they're sharing quite a bit. I think it's going to hinder both to some extent from a fantasy perspective, which is going to be a little bit annoying, but you always worry on those 1-year deals for running backs. Is it just in case we don't get the guy in the draft that we want, or do they actually believe in this guy as their frontline starter? And maybe it ended up being both. They didn't get the guy they want, and they trust him enough. Who knows? But either way, he came out as a winner. And another one that I wondered if a team that might look at investing in the running back position, just because of the question marks around their current running back, was the Cleveland Browns. I really thought that they might go after a running back as well, with how talented that offensive line is, how much they run the football in Cleveland. And Nick Chubb is coming off this really bad knee injury. Were they going to look at their running back of the future potentially in this draft? They didn't, which tells me that they have some confidence that he could come back and be the lead guy. I know they signed Donta Foreman to back him up, but that's just a good backup guy. That's what good teams do. They make sure they have solid backups, but he's nobody that's truly threatening if Nick Chubb is ready to go. So the fact that they didn't take, one of these running backs, Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, all these guys we talked about, Marshawn Lloyd, the fact that they didn't invest any draft capital on a running back, I think that's good news for Nick Chubb.
Yeah, it's weird that the teams we would have thought would have invested didn't invest, and then the teams we didn't want to invest did invest. What an interesting class this was. Josh, you got a couple of guys for us from the veterans who won.
Yeah, let's stick with the running backs. Zamir White, I think everybody kind of expected him to see some competition. I know that they brought in Alexander Madison in the offseason after Minnesota cut him. But I mean, he was a 4th round pick 2 years ago. So he's entering year 3. I mean, he looked solid when filling in last year for Josh Jacobs, but it wasn't anything otherworldly. Hasn't really shown much in the way of pass catching. So maybe they're just kind of deciding that, we're just going to have like a first, second down guy and then a third down guy, because they did invest the 6th round pick in Dylan Lobb. But I don't think you look at Dylan Lobb and say, yeah, that's a 3-down workhorse right there. And we got Steele in the 6th round, right? The guy's Danny Woodhead. Sorry. Just my opinion. Of Garrett, I'm sure you can probably shed some light, a better opinion on Dylan Lobb. But And I don't think that's really a far-fetched way to look at it when Tom Telesco, who was in San Diego and Los Angeles with the Chargers, I believe brought on Danny Woodhead as well as Austin Eckler. So maybe he's just got a type when it comes to third down guys and pass catchers, right? And he wants that early down kind of, we'll call it a thumper, I guess. Like I think Zamir White's about 210, 215. So it's about pretty average size for a running back, at least a starter anyway. So, but I mean, Josh Jacobs is leaving behind 46 rushing touchdowns over the last 5 years. This is a team that's going to pound the rock. Luke Getsey's now their offensive coordinator, and he will run the football. And he runs a lot of formations that favor the running back, a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 21 personnel. So there's going to be ways to get Zamir White the football. And I think he comes out a big time winner from this draft because they did not invest the top 3-round pick, or really top 4-round pick, 5-round pick on a running back.
All I'm hearing is Dylan Lobb is going to catch 100 balls. So I'm all in at this point. That's what I'm hearing.
Not if Brock Bowers had something to say about
it. And then, Josh, I feel like you've had a roller coaster relationship with Kyler Murray. Like I feel like sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're cold. Right now you're hot.
Yeah, well, I mean, how can you not? Dude just got Marvin Harrison Jr. to throw the football to.
and we'll move on. No, I'm joking.
No, I think the biggest thing with Kyler Murray and why he's kind of been so up and down for me has been he stopped running. And Cliff Kingsbury in that offense would just pound the rock right up the middle to the running back. And that's why you saw a steady string of guys like Kenyon Drake and James Conner. And I know there's another one that I'm missing, have 10 plus rushing touchdowns, and Kyler Murray get kind of left for dead when it comes to what he can produce on the ground because he is athletic enough to where he can provide fantasy managers with a lot of rushing upside. They ended up, I think they had close to 90 rush attempts from the quarterback position last year. And Kyler, in the 8 games that he started, was averaging about 6 rush attempts per game. If he's able to bring that level of rush attempts, I'm very much back on board Kyler Murray being a top 10 quarterback, especially now that he has a bona fide wide receiver 1 to throw to, which he really did not last year. And of course, missed the half of the previous season with DeAndre Hopkins to throw to. Plus, he gets a new backfield tandem mate in Trey Benson to pair with James Conner, which I think helps keep James Conner fresh because they had no semblance of an RB2 in this offense last year. So you could be looking at a guy that could top 140 carries this year and be the bell cow by 2025. And that's only going to make Kyler Murray's job easier. And oh, by the way, Trey McBride is the legit. So I think that everything is set up right now, domino effect for Kyler Murray to be a top 10, top 8, top 7 quarterback in 2024.
Garrett, I'm going to ask you about Marvin Harrison. But before I do that, Josh, I think you probably already answered this. Are you concerned about the lack of a wide receiver too, or is that just Trey McBride all day?
It's Trey McBride. This offense is right out of Cleveland. And this is what Drew Petzing is running. It's a wide receiver 1. It's a tight end 1 offense. So Marvin Harrison's going to see 130 targets. Trey McBride's going to see 125 targets. And then Michael Wilson's going to have like 65, 70. All right. Like that's the pie right there.
There you go. So look at Cleveland, see Arizona, but probably in a much better situation. Garrett, we started calling it, prospect fatigue. People started finding ways to not like Marvin Harrison. You're an Ohio guy. I think that's an Ohio State jersey. Oh, that's a Jerry Rice jersey behind you. Never mind.
But it would make sense though. Hey, I'm a diehard like Browns and Buckeyes, and I have a San Francisco and Seattle jersey. It makes no sense.
Yeah,
but
there you go. But I'm just going to ask you point blank is Marvin Harrison generational? It was a word that was thrown around a lot, but then people started saying, Malik Neighbors is just as good as he is. When you look at landing spots, nobody beats Marvin Harrison when it comes to the landing spot. I think that's pretty easily said. But the question is he the best wide receiver to have ended up in that landing spot?
Absolutely. For me, I do, we mentioned the nerd scores, and I have my own film process that I go through, and we've been very blessed with some very good wide receivers over the past 5 seasons. This is year 5 of the nerd score. So we're starting to get some good historical data now coming out. The top 5 receivers I graded up until this point, and it's not in an exact order, but it was roughly Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Garrett Wilson were the top 4. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top 1 overall. So that's obviously a good group to be in.
Yeah.
And these are all pre-draft. But what makes that even crazier is the highest grade I ever gave to any one of these guys was 80. It was like 80.7. That was the highest receiver grade I'd ever given. Marvin Harrison comes in and gets plus an 82, like 82 point something. So not even is he the best. There's actually a gap between him and the rest of these from a purely prospect perspective.
Yeah.
Obviously, team, landing spot, all of that stuff plays into it. But as a pure prospect, I think he is clearly the best one that we've had in at least the past 5 years. And like we said, there have been a lot of really good ones come out over the past 5 years.
Perfect. You love to hear it. And it's going to sound ridiculous. It's refreshing to hear people talking about Marvin Harrison now the way they were talking about him 3 months ago before we all got bored with talking about how great he was. So no,
absolutely.
I think it's a great take. And for the veteran winners, for me, to no surprise whatsoever, it's going to be the old running backs. You look at Ezekiel Elliott, who we talked about at the top of the show, who wasn't a winner necessarily during the draft, but man, was he a winner 24 hours after the draft concluded when Jerry Jones just looked at this running back class and said, didn't want any of these guys. Give me back Zeke. And the guys he's competing with, Enrico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, who is half of an Ezekiel Elliott. I agree with Josh. The efficiency isn't there, but I wonder if the durability might be there and if we could still see him get the carries. If this might be a Joe Mixon situation, Josh. 3.7 yards per carry, but they got nobody else. So they're just going to keep giving him the damn ball. And this is still a Dallas team that's going to score touchdowns. And I think that's something that could really boost Ezekiel Elliott up. And then the other guy I just happened to trade for in a dynasty is Gus Edwards, because you have a team that we know is going to run the football. And you had a team that if people had money to blow, they put it on Blake Corum becoming a Los Angeles Charger, but the Los Angeles Rams had something to say about that. And instead the Chargers don't walk out with a running back until I think the 5th or 6th round. I'm looking it up here. Kamani Vidal in the 6th round. They obviously brought in J.K. Dobbins, who is, 2 plays away from tearing his other Achilles and not playing anymore. So we have this situation where Gus Edwards could be a bell cow for at least a few weeks. And Gus Edwards, for a big guy, puts up good yards per carry. He does not catch the ball. Let's be very clear about that. That is not a part of Gus Edwards' game. But this is a team that I feel with Justin Herbert, with a decent group of wide receivers, could be in scoring position. And I just love what that could mean for Gus Edwards. And I love what it could mean for Ezekiel Elliott. These are guys that if I'm on a dynasty team, and I mean, Josh knows I'm on a dynasty team in this situation right now where I have very bad running backs. And that is why I trade for Gus Edwards. I need something to get me through this next season because I can still contend with the other positions I have. Gus Edwards, Ezekiel Elliott are guys that you can put cheap offers out for right now. If you're a team that's contending, certainly do not buy these guys if you are not contending, plain and simple. Garrett, where we have winners, we have losers. And let's get back into the rookies. And we're not calling these guys losers. We're just saying the situation or the draft capital did not quite play out to their favor. So when it came out of this weekend, who did you think it went pretty bad for from a rookie standpoint?
Yeah, there were a lot of guys that, from a rookie standpoint, it went really well. But we saw a lot of other guys where it was a little bit rough. I think one of the ones that you could consider a loser potentially would be Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd was in the same type of conversation as Jonathon Brooks and Trey Benson. He was the 3rd running back off the board. He also went in the 3rd round. And so all of that on paper is like, man, Marshawn Lloyd, absolute, could be a stud. But then you factor in, well, he went to Green Bay and they just signed Josh Jacobs in the offseason. So I think on the surface, he's a loser. And we saw draft capital wise in rookie drafts, he's been dropping down boards a little bit, getting him in the end of the 2nd round at this point in most rookie drafts, somewhere in that 207 to 210 range. And
he went into 301 and one that Ryan and I are in. So.
Okay. Yeah.
To me.
So super flex at PPR.
It's as much as I say all that because draft capital dictates that this guy clearly was a loser in that sense. I think it's an awesome buy opportunity. If you look at Josh Jacobs' contract, it's a little fugazi. It's a 4-year deal, but they got it out after year one. So it's a very fancy 1-year deal. That's really what it is. And maybe Josh Jacobs balls out and the Packers are like, yep, we keep it going. Let's keep it rolling. But if he does what we've seen a lot of older running backs do in their second contract, where it's just, he was fine. It was okay. It wasn't anything special. And Marshawn Lloyd looks good as a rookie. This could easily flip real quick. And all of a sudden in year 2, we have a guy like Lloyd that has the backfield more or less to himself. So I think he was a loser on the surface, but I think that presents a good buy opportunity.
So your analysis of Lloyd, I'm sure, is spot on, but you gave me a flashback that you did not mean to give me to the 2022 class. And I need you to convince me, especially since I've now drafted him, that Marshawn Lloyd is not Isaiah Spiller, because you said he's being talked about as the same as these top guys, but he didn't have the best landing spot and he went a little bit later. And that was how I convinced myself Isaiah Spiller was going to be good. Josh laughs because he knows I bought in way too hard and it has been tragedy. This is not the situation here, right? This is not Garrett, right?
Fortunately, I don't believe this is the situation. So that's why I love doing, I keep bringing it up, but it's why I love doing the nerd score, because it's a good way for me to track how much did I actually like a player. And there's a numerical value to it. So I can compare classes very easily and tell you what I thought about a player that year versus what I think about a player this year. So that's why it's one of my favorite things to do. So I'll look up their exact scores and tell you what they are in a second. It'll take me a second to find it. Okay. But I viewed them as very different prospects. I think Lloyd is much more talented than Spiller.
Just the way you said it, you're like, he's being compared to the top guys in the class. I'm like, yeah, so was Isaiah Spiller at one point. And that, like I said, how you described Lloyd is how I talked myself into Spiller, and I can't get hurt like that again. I just don't have it in me.
I get you, man. I understand it completely.
While you look that up, Josh, talk to us about a couple of guys you had as winners, and let's just stick with the running back for now.
Yeah, let's talk about Braelon Allen. It was interesting because we had one of our mock draft shows that I was on, and
I remember you saying this.
I'm not like the biggest like running back guy in rookie drafts, but Braelon Allen fell to me in the 3rd round, and I'm like, I mean, shit, at this point, it's a screaming value, right? Like, this guy is being looked at as potentially a top 5 running back. I understand maybe this isn't the best class, but there's plenty of teams that need a running back. So you got to think that he's going to come off the board, right? Yeah. Then he goes to the freaking Jets in the 4th round, and they've got superstar Mr. Breece Hall, RB2 in fantasy last year. Why in God's name do I want to invest anything more than a 4th round pick in Braelon Allen at this point?
So he did fall to me in the 4th round. But I'm going to throw one thing out there, and this is why I'm excited, and this is why I'll be looking for Braelon Allen in a lot of drafts, Josh. He's only 20. So if this dude sits for the next 4 years, he's still coming in at the same age as some of these running backs.
I mean, look, you're not wrong on that front, and I get that, he's still fairly new to, like, learning the running back position and all this stuff, and running backs have short shelf lives and blah, blah, blah. Let's remember, Ryan, this is still largely a redraft show. He has no value in 2024 at all. None whatsoever.
100% fair. You cannot.
None whatsoever. I personally don't even think he has any value until at maybe 2026 at earliest, right?
So we'll see you in 2 years.
Right. Basically, when he's 22 or 23 or whatever he's going to be, right?
I'm still happy I have him at that point.
I mean, the only thing that makes any kind of sense to me is that when you look at the running back opportunity share that it becomes available in New York because they let go of Dalvin Cook, right? Dalvin Cook had almost a 21% share of the running back carries in New York. That accounted for just over 17%. Breece Hall, coming off of the injury, had 57.5% of the rushing opportunity with the Jets, almost 70% of the running back share. So if they're ready and willing to say, all right, Breece, you got this, baby. Braelon Allen has maybe a 20% opportunity share? Maybe.
Yeah, rough.
like that there's just no value in that at all, unless you think that Breece Hall gets hurt, which, let's face it, this is running backs we're talking about. It could very well be the case, but you can't love the landing spot on the surface by any means.
All right. Before we move on to your other guy, Garrett, what do you got for me? Why is Lloyd better?
All right. So for Lloyd, he had a 74.45 for me. So just to give like some historical comps from our grades, not necessarily from anyone else. Oh shoot! Of course, I just switched over. But I'll pull that back up. And then Isaiah Spiller had a 72.3.
Okay,
so that compared to
2-point gap, which
Isaiah,
you pointed out at the wide receivers was a big gap. So
yeah, it's a pretty big gap. So he would have compared to like Keyshawn Vaughn. This is Isaiah Spiller. Keyshawn Vaughn.
Another guy Ryan
CH.
CH.
Hold on a second. I think we're finding the flaw in my system right here. Keep going.
All right. Roshan Johnson, Dwayne McBride, and Kenneth Gainwell were in the 72 range.
I got to start taking the nerd score more seriously and stay the fuck away from 72s, plain and simple.
This is what I'm going to start doing from now on. Anytime Ryan tells me he likes a running back, I'm going to go to DynastyNerds.com. I'm going to pull up the nerd score, and I'm going to be like, Ryan, you know where this ranks? The other guys that you like, stay the hell away.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing.
So, yeah, you want to really be above that kind of 73 threshold. That's where we've seen a lot of success. So the other guys that would be similar range as Lloyd for us would have been Devon Achane, Trey Benson's very close, Tyjae Spears, Charbonnet, Travis Etienne.
Okay. Hey, I'm happy about that. Much better comparison, much better company. Believe me, because everybody you mentioned in that first group has been on and off of Dynasty team of mine, except for CEH, because I just can't quit him. Josh, coming back to you. You had a wide receiver for us, and I'm glad you brought him up. I didn't think he'd be in the loser column with first round draft capital, surprisingly.
Hey, it's Kadarius Toney all over again, right?
Ooh.
No, I don't think Ricky Pearsall is Kadarius Toney. Although they did go to the same school, so there's that. But no, I mean, we kind of talked about this on draft night, right, Ryan? So the wide receiver 3 in San Francisco, you're lucky to see 40 targets per game. And yes, I went through and I dug a little bit on this. Only once since 2018 in San Francisco has the wide receiver 3 topped 45 targets.
And I guarantee that was before Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, definitely. And since that same time frame, only once has that wide receiver 3 topped a 10% target share. Brock Purdy only threw the football 491 times last year. They're going to run the football, and they're going to score a ton of points, and they're going to score it very, very quickly. But this offense runs through Aiyuk, it runs through Deebo, runs through McCaffrey, it runs through Kittle. He is no better than the 5th passing option on this team. Now, I'll say the same thing as I said with Braelon Allen. Because this is largely a redraft show, yes, Ricky Pearsall, big-time loser in 2024. This could very well change if or when Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel end up getting traded, or one of them, potentially even McCaffrey or Kittle, suffer some level of serious injury where they're going to miss a large amount of time. But this reminds me a lot of when San Francisco drafted Brandon Aiyuk and then ultimately kind of kept him caged a little bit. And we didn't really see a big breakout from Aiyuk until year 3. Yeah. This could very well be Ricky Pearsall's trajectory, which makes it a little scary because he's 24 years old as a rookie. Yeah, but big-time loser for 2024.
These COVID years, man, have just pumped up the ages of these rookies, and it's made things just very, very strange. That's a really good point. But yeah, looking at Pearsall, I guess I can jump into my guy who has already been brought up in the chat by Scampers. Similar situation to being an older rookie who is now trapped for 2 to 3 years. Michael Penix Jr. was the first name I thought of when we saw this, Josh, when I saw this question, just because you didn't expect him to go to a team that had zero need for a quarterback. And guess who else didn't
expect high in the draft?
Yeah. Guess who else didn't expect it? Kirk Cousins, Arthur Blank, probably everybody else in the room. But yeah, very strange move by the Atlanta Falcons there, and it puts Penix in a situation. Now, there are a lot of folks out there who believe Penix needed some time to develop, and he's certainly going to get that. But I would have liked it better if he was with a quarterback that was more his play style. I mean, he's going to likely learn from Cousins, but I don't know that's going to translate to Michael Penix isn't going to step on the field and be Kirk Cousins. They aren't close to the same kind of quarterback. So found that interesting. And then how could you not mention Troy Franklin, who went from falling to the Bills in the first round to falling past everybody in the fourth round before probably being saved by Bo Nix personally. Like, just go fucking draft my guy real quick. I need him. Like, so I'm interested. It's always weird to me, Josh. We talk about this on the mock draft show all the time. Sometimes in mock drafts, I'll not take a guy who I really want because I want to see how far he'll fall. I wonder if Bo Nix wasn't in Denver, how far Troy Franklin falls. And so before we move on, Garrett, because you're way smarter than Josh and myself, did you see this kind of plummet from Troy Franklin? Like, this was a guy who the fantasy community latched onto, but the NFL community clearly was not in sync.
All right. So I miss all the time. I do. So I don't want it to sound like I don't, but I was way out. I was way out on Troy Franklin. So my nerd score for him, and remember these lock pre-draft, he had the 12th or 13th best nerd score at the wide receiver position.
Kudos, my friend. That is impressive.
But to be fair, I had I did have Malik Washington a spot out of him who fell to the 6th. So they don't hit perfectly. But as far as a tape score for me, I was really concerned about Troy Franklin because he when I went to go watch his tape, I knew he was a fast player. And I remembered that he ran a pretty solid 40 time. I couldn't remember what it was, but I try to avoid the combine numbers and just watch the tape for what it is. And I'm watching it and I'm like, yeah, he beat some guys deep. But when he's running his routes, there's something weird. And I can't quite place my finger on it, but he looks slow, but I know he's not. And I couldn't quite rectify what that was. So I went to the combine numbers and sure enough, he ran a fast 40. And I was like, all right, well, it must be me. Maybe I ate something funky and, I'm seeing things wrong or who knows, I guess, I don't know. But then I saw the 10-yard split and it explained everything I needed to know. He ran a 1.61 10-yard split, which was the slowest out of any wide receiver in the class. So what that tells me is in short area or quick get-offs, he's not able to do it. So does he have the long speed? Sure, which is great for a Z wide receiver that you want for big plays. But for a guy to operate in small, quick, short areas, he's not a guy that's going to do that well. So long-term, as a wide receiver being able to get open, I had some real concerns about him being able to do that. And that showed up on tape. You watch his plays, like even if you were to be the scout that only watched highlights, if you go watch his highlight tape, almost every single play is a play where he just outran the defender or a blown coverage, like almost every single one. Very rarely was it set up by some really good route running on his part. So that's what concerned me about Troy Franklin.
So I know you said you miss, but I just want to throw out here. You said you had Malik Washington a spot ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
Having someone ranked 12th and them going in the 6th, not a big deal. Having someone ranked 13th who everybody else has going in the 1st and being right, very big deal. If you need any more advertisement to go sign up at Dynasty Nerds and make sure you're taking advantage of their product, I don't know what to tell you because kudos, man. I'm like, it's so funny you said that he was your 13th in nerd score. I went and looked at my rookie rankings after landing spots and he fell to 13 for me. So if I had just worked with you guys from the first part, I would have never been as wrong on him as I was. And Garrett, let's finish up the show with the guys who have been in the league for a while, the veterans who things did not shake out their way in the draft. They either got competition or things, like I said, just didn't shake out the way you wanted it to for some of these veterans.
Even though I'm still a fan of this player and I think he's a talented guy, I think it would be tough to call Kyren Williams anything but a loser in this draft. You take a 3rd round running back, that's instant competition. Like, I don't care how good you are. And he was freaking fantastic last year. Like Dude was a stud. I thought there was no chance that the Rams take a running back on day 2. No chance. Well, then they draft Blake Corum, who ironically was a guy that I comped to Kyren Williams pre-draft. So I think they are similar type players, not fantastic athletes, but smart players that do a lot of the little things well. And so it's going to be really interesting. It almost kind of reminds me of Pollard and Spears in Tennessee, where you have two guys that play very similar styles of football that I think they might choose to use them interchangeably. Now, as a guy with a decent amount of Kyren Williams, I hope that's not the case. I hope he is still the clear one. But I would be lying if I said I was anything but terrified once this pick came in.
Before the draft, I traded Kyren Williams to get Brandon Aiyuk. And after that Blake Corum pick, I said, love it.
Look at this guy. Yeah.
Garrett said he's terrified. Garrett, if you want to feel better, if the rest of you want to feel better, our Chris Molina did just write an excellent article about why he is not overly worried. He is a huge Rams fan and kind of likes this pick for the long and short of it. So check that out. It's on clubfantasyffl.com right now. Just published it yesterday morning, in fact. So
nice. All right. I'm bookmarking it because I need it to stop crying into my pillow at night.
Yeah, to make you feel a little bit better. Josh, thank God Joe's not here because I don't want to hear about Jakobi Meyers for 4 hours. So can you give us the abridged version of why Jakobi Meyers is a loser in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't – they spent the 13th overall pick on a tight end that basically is a glorified slot receiver. I know the narrative around Jakobi Meyers is that that's kind of what he is, a slot receiver. Last year, he didn't even top 30% of his routes out of the slot. So I think Meyers is still kind of safe. But again, if you're spending the 13th overall pick on a pass catcher, there's only so many passes to go around. Tight ends in a Luke Getsy offense, Cole Kmet scored 13 touchdowns the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers is going to score touchdowns. The inflation of touchdowns that Jakobi Meyers had last year, expect that to drop exponentially, like more to probably his baseline of like 2 to 4, which is kind of what he was getting in New England for a very long time.
I was going to say, we call that regression to the mean. He is coming right back
exactly.
to it.
So, but I also look at this too, again, regime change, new GM comes in, new head coach, who kind of sort of is the old head coach, and then a new offense. You still don't have, in my opinion, your quarterback of the future. I know we all love Gardner Minshew around here, but he's nothing more than a bridge. And I know, Ryan, I know you can accept that.
Oh, 100%.
Aiden O'Connell didn't really impress much last year. But again, young quarterbacks, they take time. I get it. Maybe he blossoms with a new coordinator. Meyers is in year 2 of a 3-year deal that this regime did not sign. So they could very easily phase him out this year and cut him, and then Brock Bowers to the frickin' moon, right?
Yeah.
And it could still be Brock Bowers to the frickin' moon this year. And I know one of your guys is the one that basically Brock Bowers is leaping over, Ryan. But again, I mentioned this earlier. When you look at Luke Getsy's system, it is a lot of 12 personnel and 21 personnel. They only ran 11 personnel, actually less than 60% of the time last year. So you're going to see all the tight ends on the field. You're going to see Adams. You're going to see Meyers. But don't be shocked if Brock Bowers cuts in very much to that target share that was going to Jakobi Meyers last year.
No, I think that's absolutely fair. Garrett, because Brock Bowers plays into both mine and Josh's, after Josh talks about his second one, I'm going to come to you to talk about Brock Bowers just a little bit. And so, Josh, your next one is an entire team.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we touched on it a little bit with the Jonathon Brooks, but it's the entire Panthers offense. They basically said everybody that Frank Reich and company brought in, you do not matter at all. They went through this offseason. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They drafted Xavier Leggett in the first round. They drafted Jonathon Brooks in the second round. They drafted Jatavian Sanders in the third round. They basically are reshaping this entire offense with rookies and said, Adam Thielen, you're 34 years old. Bye. Tommy Tremble, Ian Thomas, you guys suck. Bye. Yeah. Chuba Hubbard, last year of the deal. Miles Sanders, disappointing. Bye. Like, this offense reshaping in a heartbeat. Dave Canales went out, got his guys. I don't know how you can feel comfortable if you roster Sanders, Hubbard, Thielen in Dynasty. You're not spending any type of redraft picks on any of these guys. 140 targets for Deontay Johnson, incoming. Jonathon Brooks, 200 carries, incoming. Jatavian Sanders, 5 touchdowns, incoming. That is what's going to happen with this Panthers offense this year.
Yeah. And Scampers points out the only winner is Bryce. And I think that makes a very, very good point. And then so one of the first names that popped up for me, and Josh, you brought up a good point. They're going to run a ton of 12 personnel, but the very first name to come up for me was Michael Mayer. And it's not necessarily that he's an enormous loser. And it's just that we thought he could be a monster with a breakout, and Brock Bowers smashes the monster part of that. So Garrett, again, I just keep coming back to, we love to call people generational, and we called 3 different people in this draft the best we've seen in a long time. But Brock Bowers is one who a lot of people wanted to knock his size. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not a tape watcher like you are. And so when I watched him, the numbers are impressive, and what he does as a whole is impressive. But play by play, I wasn't all that impressed. I was worried about the size until I saw that he was the exact same size as Sam Laporta, and that certainly worked. And so are there any knocks on Brock Bowers specifically landing with the Raiders?
Yeah, for me, I do think the term generational gets thrown around a little too much. I don't know that I was quite there on Bowers and Caleb, although fantastic prospects, both top of the list for me on their respective positions. For me, it was just Marvin Harrison Jr. was the only guy that I would really, give that kind of moniker to. But all of that being said, Brock Bowers is really freaking good. I mean, He's really freaking good. There's not a lot of deficiencies in his game. He does block well enough to where if you need him to, he can. But the good news is he's not such a good blocker that you're going to make him do it all the time. So I think he will be split out often. I do think he's got great hands, yards after the catch. We saw him, dominate college football as a freshman on a team with, think about all of these guys that were at Georgia that he outproduced every year. George Pickens was there. Adonai Mitchell was there. Ladd McConkey was there. Jermaine Burton was there. There were a lot of guys that were first, second, third round picks that are now in the NFL that did not outproduce Brock Bowers. And he's not even a receiver. So it's really impressive what he did over his time at Georgia. So yeah, he's an absolute stud.
No, I love it. And then my other guys, Zay Jones, pour one out. As soon as the Brian Thomas pick was made, we were worried. I didn't think they would just cut him. The guy's been putting in work for you guys for years now, and you're just gone. And then Alec Pierce is a guy that a lot of people were higher on than I was during the draft process a couple of years ago. And I didn't like the landing spot. I hated it more once Anthony Richardson was there because I just didn't think they were going to throw enough. And now you throw AD Mitchell into all of this, and I just feel like we're getting super crowded on a team with a run-first quarterback and one of the better running backs in the league. And I just don't know that the targets are going to be there. Now, obviously, a lot like Ricky Pearsall, we also don't know how long Michael Pittman's going to be there. Is he playing out the franchise tag? Did he get a new deal?
No, he signed a 3-year deal.
He got a 3 year.
Oh, he signed. Okay, so we know he's going to be there. So I take that back. So just not great in general. And I think AD Mitchell with that second round draft capital is going to get, because I think Pierce was a 4th round pick. So you're just going to see these guys with the lesser draft capital fall down the board. And so it's a guy that showed flashes last year, saw more targets than I thought he was probably going to see. But again, just not the great situation. He's getting a smaller piece of an already small pie. So those are the losers for me and for these guys. And guys, that's the end of the show. Oh, Josh is about to throw something else in.
I actually, Garrett, I want to get your opinion on Adonai Mitchell because I know that, I feel like his evaluations were all over the board, right? You had some people 100%. That absolutely love the talent that, then he comes out, he plays when he wants to, takes plays off, very Randy Moss-esque, all this stuff. Just all over the place. He lands with Indianapolis, which, I think you can make an argument that is a good spot for him. That Alec Pierce really didn't do anything to pop off the table. We know Josh Downs was there. He commanded over 90 targets last year. But I also think that because of how much they threw the football with Gardner Minshew, a lot of those stats from last year are very much inflated and will not reflect to what they will do with a full healthy season of Anthony Richardson in 2024. So I'm curious to know how you feel that Adonai Mitchell fits in with this offense and what kind of trajectory we could be looking at, whether it's in 2024 or even as far out as 2026.
Yeah, I think Anthony Richardson is a big winner in all of this, getting Adonai Mitchell, and then even Anthony Gold is a very solid slot receiver that is more going to do special team stuff. But if Josh Downs were ever to go down, he would be a great replacement because he is a good route runner. He's got some good hands and some yards after the catch. But going back to AD Mitchell, I've had a lot of debates on Adonai Mitchell because if you are more of you lean more towards the analytics. His analytical profile was like dumpster juice, like booty butt cheeks. It was bad. Like it was not good. But there, as far as testing, solid, like actually more than solid, like fantastic testing numbers. Good draft capital, second round. Some were saying that he might even go in the first. So in some senses, he fell a little bit, but he got good draft capital. And for me, the tape was fantastic.
Yeah, but he looks really good. He's so fun to watch on tape. So.
He is. And for a guy of his size, I mean, you could really see it in his route. Like he was able to sink his hips well, get in and out of breaks well. When tracking the football, like he could track the football like a center fielder tracks a baseball. Like he was able to always put himself in the best possible position to catch the football. So there were a lot of things on tape that I really liked. Now, the concerns about his attitude towards the game at time, I think are legit. There were definitely times where he would take plays off. He would loaf. Sometimes he would loaf in the middle of a route and then all of a sudden realize the ball was coming his way. And then his freak athleticism allowed him to still make a play. But, there are concerns and I understand the concerns, but I think he's a great player and I think he's a great fit for this offense. Now, what we care about most, though, is fantasy football. And pairing him with Michael Pittman Jr., who I do think is obviously their alpha receiver.
Yes.
And this makes Adonai more likely to play the Z type rather than the X type. So if he's going to play the Z, what does that mean? It means he's going to be running a lot more deep routes, which lends itself to big plays, which is awesome. But in the age of cover 2, defenses are taking away a lot of those big plays. You have 2 high safeties, so they're not allowing you to get beat deep very often. We'll see how they guard the Chargers in this new or the Colts in this new offense. But overall, I think it's going to be difficult fantasy-wise for Adonai to produce great things early, even though I think he's an extremely talented prospect.
Oh, that's great. Scampers, we didn't even talk about Detroit, but the long and short is it means great things for ARSB. He's great. Nobody's moving past him of anybody we talked about. Buy, hold, do whatever you need to do. Get and keep ARSB. Guys, that's the end of the show. Garrett, if anybody has not been paying attention, tell them who you are and where they can find your work.
Yeah, Garrett Price. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyPrice. All of my work is with Dynasty Nerds. And so you can find me talking prospects and players and the draft capital, all that fun stuff. You can find me talking that on YouTube as well. Lots of good videos and stuff coming out this time of year.
There we go. Guys, that's Garrett Price. Make sure you're following him. Next week, we're going to do the celebration of the fantasy football industry, which Josh and I hadn't even confirmed we're going to do it, but I guess I'm committing me and Joe to doing it, where we're going to have a bunch of guests on just basically telling you where you can find them and what they're going to be working on this season. It's going to be a show where we'll answer your questions, so make sure you tune in, and you might have a random expert that you were looking forward to who's going to be there to answer the question for you. Josh, tell everybody what else we got going on.
Yeah, let's see. Saturday, Maga Like It's Hot. Who's your guest on Saturday?
Who is my guest on Saturday? I don't know. I confirm guests on Thursdays, so give me 2 seconds and I'll tell you.
All right, well, Saturday is Mocking Like It's Hot doing another Superflex rookie mock.
Oh, it's Chris from Mocking with the Stars.
There you go, Chris Batterstyle. There you go. Sunday, the Dynasty After Party guys, Sunday morning, 11 a.m., also doing another Superflex rookie mock. They're doing it the post to kind of compare and contrast to the pre-NFL draft that they did about 5 weeks ago. Mocking with the Stars on Monday at 10. Masterclass, our best ball show with Stacy and Gator J. That will be on at 9 o'clock this week as Stacy and Jay are doing a FFPC best ball draft. And then, of course, we'll be back on Wednesday, as well as Wednesday morning, Who's Your Caddy, our Golf DFS show with Kelly and Adam.
So we have you covered. There's no reason for you not to hit that subscribe button. And if you need a little bit of a teaser, we might even do a Scott Fishbowl mock for you this weekend. So we're going to be doing a ton of stuff for you. We don't even have Scott Fishbowl scoring. We're talking about Scott Fishbowl mocks. So guys, that is the end of the show. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week celebrating the entire fantasy industry. We're going to line up some guests to come in, tell you what they're working on and why you should be following their site. And that's what we like to do, is just spread the love around the industry. Thank you so much to Garrett for coming on. Thank you for Dynasty Nerds for everything you guys do in the Dynasty community. Because like I said, we used you guys on a ton of our threads this year, where we just put threads of all the content that everybody's putting out. And it was so easy to find stuff from you guys with videos and articles and all that stuff. So we appreciate everything you guys are doing over there. Folks, hit that subscribe button. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and we will see you